On the 40th floor of a glowing Chicago skyscraper, billionaire CEO David Mitchell watched his entire empire collapse in front of his eyes. A silent cyber attack erased millions of dollars in seconds that no help. No team, no answers. Just as he was about to give up, a cleaning lady quietly stepped into the room, looked at his screen, and said 5 words that changed his life forever. This isn't a crash, it's an attack. That woman was about to become his miracle. David Mitchell had always believed control was permanent. From the glass walls of Horizon Tech's top floor, the city had bowed beneath him for 12 straight years. Every deal, every acquisition, every innovation passed through his hands first. That night was supposed to be his greatest victory, a final signature on a billion-dollar merger that would make history. Then the screens began to flicker T first. It seemed like a minor glitch, a blinking cursor, a file that refused to open. Then another, then dozens. Red warning symbols erupted across every monitor. Servers dropped offline one by one, heartbeat after heartbeat disappearing from the digital body of his empire. System failure. Unauthorized access detected. Data breach in progress. David froze. He had seen market crashes. He had survived lawsuits. He had crushed competitors. But this was different. He was helpless. Billions of dollars vanished in seconds. Years of brilliance, sleepless nights, sacrifices, all erased by an invisible hand he couldn't fight. His body went cold, yet sweat dripped down his temples. For the first time in his life, David Mitchell felt small. The office doors, once a symbol of power, now felt like prison bars. That's when the soft hum of a cleaning cart broke the silence. Maria Santos stepped inside, pushing her cart gently across the polished floor. She had cleaned this office for years, wiping his desk, emptying his trash, remaining invisible to a man who never once looked her in the eye. But tonight, she stopped. Her gaze locked onto the screens. Her expression changed. "This is not random," she said quietly. David turned, startled. "What did you say?" She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the code, the patterns, the chaos on display. "It's a logic loop attack," she murmured. "They didn't break in through your firewall. They walked through your oldest access key." David stared at her, stunned. "How do you know that?" She met his eyes, calm, certain, unshaken, because she said gently, "I helped design a system like this once before the world forgot my name." In that moment, David no longer saw a cleaning lady. He saw the only light in the darkness of everything he had just lost. The elevator doors slid open with a dull metallic groan, and a breath of cold air rushed out like a warning. The basement of Horizon Tech was nothing like the shining floors above. No glass, no art, no view of the city that David once ruled. Just narrow concrete walls, heavy pipes that hissed and trembled, and a low, constant hum from rows of towering servers that IT was the heartbeat of the company. And right now, that heartbeat was fading. David stepped out first, his footsteps echoing against the cement. He had walked into this basin only twice before, both times guided by engineers who spoke in language he barely needed to understand. This place had never been his world. But Maria moved with certainty. Her fingers brushed lightly over the server racks as she walked between them, almost like greeting old friends. The blue and red indicator lights flickered wildly, confused, frantic. "They hit the core routing system," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Not to steal, not to ransom. They wanted chaos, collapse, silence." David swallowed hard. "Can you fix it?" He had asked that question thousands of times to dozens of people throughout his career, but never had it mattered this much. She looked at him then, really looked at him, not as a billionaire, not as a boss, but as a man on the edge of losing everything. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but I know how to fight it." Moments later, she was seated at one of the old terminals, a machine nobody used anymore, collecting dust in a forgotten corner. She wiped the screen with the sleeve of her uniform, cracked her fingers once, and began to type. And when she did, the room changed. Her hands moved fast, too fast to follow. Lines of code poured down the screen like rain in a storm. David watched silently, barely breathing, as she opened windows that hadn't been touched in years. Systems buried deep inside Horizon Tech's architecture came alive under her command. You said you designed systems like this once, David said quietly. She didn't stop typing. I helped build the backbone for 3 national networks, she replied. Banks, airports, government databases. David froze. Then why are you here? Why are you cleaning my floors? Her fingers slowed for just a second. My husband died in a car crash, she said flatly. A drunk driver. 2 months later, my son got sick. Rare immune disorder. I spent every savings I trying to save him. She took a slow breath, then continued. Nothing was left. Not the money. Not the connections. People stopped answering my calls. The world only respects genius when it's dressed in importance. So she had traded her title for survival, her keyboard for a mop, her brilliance for silence. Until tonight, sirens blared softly through the walls. The building's automated voice repeated, system failure. Emergency protocol in effect. Above them, a corporate empire was dying, but below, Maria was resurrecting it. Another hour passed. Then another. Tom had lost meaning. The world shrank to the light of the monitor, the rapid tapping of keys, the beads of sweat forming across her forehead. David watched her the way a drowning man watches the last flicker of a lighthouse. Who is doing this? He asked. She stared into the screen. Someone who knows you very well. Someone with a grudge tied to money or power. Both, he whispered, T hour 4. Her shoulders trembled, T hour 5. Her eyes were burning from the screen, but she never stopped. She rerouted damaged connections, built temporary firewalls, locked invisible doors, and trapped the attack inside a sealed digital cage of her own design. All that data they destroyed, David asked, hopeless again. Is it gone? No, she said. It's been hiding, just like I have. Then, at 3 a.m., something miraculous happened one by one. The red warning signal shifted, red to amber, amber to green. The server fan steadied. The alarms went silent. The building exhaled as if waking from a nightmare. On the main screen, a simple message appeared. System restored. Integrity, 100%. David staggered back, his hand gripping a metal shelf to steady himself. A sound left his throat, something between a laugh and a sob. You did it, he whispered. Maria leaned back in the chair, exhausted, her hands trembling at last. For the first time, emotion cracked her calm expression. It's breathing again, she said softly. Your company, it's alive. He stared at the graphs returning to normal, the security locks sliding back into place, the data filling back in like blood rushing into a heart. In one night. She hadn't just saved servers or files. She had saved hundreds of jobs, thousands of families, a legacy built on years of sacrifice. And something inside of David had also rebooted. He looked at the woman in the faded uniform, the one everyone had ignored, the one the world had erased. Not as a cleaner, not as invisible, but as a miracle wrapped in flesh and bones. That night, David said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, didn't just restore my company. He met her eyes full of gratitude, awe, and something deeper. It restored my faith in people. And Maria Santos, forgotten, broken, hidden for so long, had just become the most important person in his world. And the world had no idea what was coming next. Morning light poured through the towering windows of the boardroom, a golden glow washing over polished wood, leather chairs, and the city far below. The same room where million-dollar decisions had been made in minutes now carried a strange tension, the kind that made people sit straighter, speak softer, and wait for something unseen. David Mitchell stood at the head of the long table, his eyes steady, his face unreadable. Around him sat the most powerful people in Horizon Tech. Executives in custom suits, investors with sharpened smiles, men and women who had built careers on control. And at the end of the table sat Maria Santos, still in her simple uniform, still in her worn-out shoes. The contrast was deliberate. David cleared his throat. As of last night, he began calmly. Horizon Tech survived the most devastating cyber attack in our history. A total collapse. A complete wipe. Something none of you were able to stop. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others folded their arms defensively. The only reason this company still exists, he continued, is because of the woman sitting in this room with us right now. He turned slightly toward her. Maria Santos. Several heads snapped in her direction. Confusion, disbelief, even quiet laughter flickered around the table. "That's the cleaning lady," someone muttered. "Is this a joke?" Another whispered that David's voice sharpened. From this moment forward, Maria Santos is the new head of cybersecurity for Horizon Tech. Silence, then chaos. "You've lost your mind, David," one executive burst out. "This is a board-controlled appointment. She doesn't even have a current resume. She's not qualified to sit at this table." And then a voice, smooth but venomous, cut through them all. Thomas Reed, head of operations, largest shareholder besides David, a man known for his cold ambition and quiet manipulation. "This is highly inappropriate," Thomas said, folding his hands calmly. "Our company just barely survived a disaster. You're telling us the solution is the janitor?" Laughter tickled around the edges of the room. Maria said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't lower her eyes. She simply sat there, still, patient, listening. David slammed his hand on the table. "She saved your jobs. She saved your investments. She saved the livelihoods of over 3,000 people. While you were at home sleeping, she was fighting for this company in the basement. For 6 hours straight." Silence returned. "And if any of you doubt her ability," he added coldly, "you can hand in your resignation right now." No one moved. Thomas offered a thin smile. "Impressive story," he said, "but a story isn't proof." Maria finally spoke. "Then let me show you proof." David stepped back as she quietly stood up. Someone slid a tablet toward her, but she shook her head. "No, I'll use your main system." Murmurs spread again as she connected to the boardroom's massive screen, the same one reserved for investor briefings and international launches. With a few taps, a dark interface filled the wall. Lines of code, maps, time-stamped data, invisible movements revealed in glowing paths. "This," she said, pointing to the screen, "is how we were attacked. Not from outside, but from inside the system." It wore an employee's identity, a trusted one. Eyes widened. She typed again. Change the view. Deeper layers exposed themselves. The attacker knew internal schedules. Password reset windows. Server maintenance gaps. This wasn't random. It was personal. Gasps circled the table now. Then she froze the screen on one single user ID that a name slowly appeared. T. Reed. Administrator. I shifted to Thomas. The color drained from his face just slightly. Not enough for the untrained eye, but Maria noticed. David noticed. Thomas laughed softly. "This is absurd," he said. "Anyone could manipulate data after a breach. But not this cleanly," Maria replied. "And not this precisely." She pulled up another layer. Camera timestamps from the server level, paired with digital access logs. Your keycard accessed the basement level at 10:47 p.m. She glanced at him. "But you didn't use the elevator. You used the emergency stairwell. No cameras there, except one. I reactivated last night." The screen flickered to a still image of a man, half-shadowed but unmistakable. Thomas Reed. The room gasped. "You left behind more than you thought," Maria said quietly. "Arrogance makes people sloppy." Thomas stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "This is an accusation based on manipulated systems," he snapped. "I demand an investigation." "You'll get one," David replied, his voice ice cold. "And until then, security will escort you out of my building." Guards moved toward Thomas. For the first time, the man who had always commanded the room found himself powerless in it. "This isn't over," he hissed as he was taken away. His eyes locked on Maria, filled with rage, humiliation, and fear. When the doors closed behind him, the room was silent again. But this silence felt different, respectful, heavy with realization. Slowly, the same people who had mocked her earlier began to nod. Then one by one, they started to clap, a cautious clap at first, then louder, until the entire boardroom echoed with applause. Maria sat down slowly, emotion threatening to rise inside her chest. Not pride, validation that a lifetime of being unseen had just ended. David looked at her, not as a billionaire now, but as a man in awe. You didn't just save Horizon Tech, he said. You just became its future. But deep inside Maria, a quiet warning whispered. If Thomas was willing to tear down an entire empire, what else was he willing to destroy? And somewhere, out in the city, Thomas Reed was already planning his revenge. The world had changed for Maria Santos in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been invisible, just another nameless figure moving silently through the halls of a powerful corporation. Today, she was the most important person in the building and the most vulnerable, the promotions, the applause, the sudden respect. It all felt unreal. But Maria had learned long ago that when life rises too quickly, danger usually rises with it. And danger did not take long to show its face. That IT began with small things, an email with no sender, just a subject line. You should have stayed quiet. She stared at it for a moment, then closed it, told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining the shadow of fear where none existed. Then came the called and a voice, only breathing, slow, deliberate, followed by a soft click. She switched off her phone that night for the first time in years. But the fear followed her anyway. 3 days later, as Maria walked toward her car in the underground parking garage, she felt that familiar prickling on the back of her neck, the sense of being watched. She knelt, pretending to tie her shoe, and glanced beneath the vehicle. That's when she saw it, a small black object fixed just behind the rear axle, a GPS tracker. Her heartbeat slammed against her chest as if trying to break free. She swallowed the panic, stood slowly, and walked back toward the building, her movements calm, controlled, as if nothing at all had happened. But inside, everything was on fire. Someone was tracking her. Someone had been close enough to touch her car. Someone who knew exactly who was afraid of her. There was only one possible answer: Thomas Reed. From that moment on, Maria stopped reacting and started planning. She didn't report the tracker, didn't tell security, didn't even tell David. Instead, she became a ghost in her own life. She created a fake routine, drove different routes, parked in different levels, switched vehicles with a coworker, all while secretly rerouting every digital signal coming from the tracker to a decoy location miles away. She observed, she waited, she gathered every suspicious login, every encrypted call, every abnormal data transfer. Night after night, long after the building emptied, she sat alone in her new office, surrounded by code and silence, piecing together the truth thread by thread. And the truth was far worse than she imagined. Thomas hadn't acted alone, that he was working with a rival corporation, a shadow company that had been trying unsuccessfully for years to bring Horizon Tech to its knees. Sabotage, espionage, corporate murder disguised as competition. Thomas had been their insider, their knife, and she had taken that knife away, which meant she was now the target point one evening as rain streaked down the windows in silver lines and the city below drowned in cold light. Maria felt the shift in the air. Someone was in the building. Not security, not David, not the cleaning crew. The instinct that had kept her alive through loss and survival rose again. She slowly minimized her screen and remained perfectly still. Then she heard it. Footsteps slow, confident, echoing, not hiding anymore. The door to her office opened, and there he stood, Thomas Reed, in a suit. No dia, just darkness in his eyes, raw, unpolished, dangerous. You're a hard woman to track, Maria, he said quietly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. But you always forget. I built half of this place. I know every blind spot. You shouldn't be here, she replied calmly, her voice even. You were banned. He smiled. Rules don't apply to men who stopped caring. He walked closer, too close. You ruined everything for me, he murmured. My position, my power, my deal. She didn't move. You ruined yourself. His jaw tightened. These corporations, these men in suits, they use you, then toss you away. You should know that better than anyone. His eyes dragged slowly over the office. And yet you chose him. I chose truth, she replied, Silence stretched between them. Thick. Electric. Then he stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You could disappear tonight, Maria, and nobody would ever see you again. Her hand slid quietly beneath her desk, pressing a small, hidden button that he never noticed because he was too focused on the satisfaction of control. The lights in the office suddenly dimmed. The door reopened, footsteps, heavier this time. Thomas spun around just as David stepped out from the darkness behind the door, flanked by two silent security officers. You already tried to destroy my company, David said. You won't destroy her too. Thomas froze, then laughed at a dark, defeated sound. So this was a setup, he sneered. Every word you just said, Maria added quietly, was recorded. Every confession, every threat. His smile vanished. You work for a rival company, David said coldly. You sabotaged us. And just now, you confirmed it yourself. Thomas looked from one to the other, realization crashing over him. You think this ends here? He spat. If you expose them, they'll come for you. Both of you. Let them come, David said. Security stepped forward. But Thomas, desperate now, shoved past them and bolted for the exit. Could be why the time guards reached the hallway. He was already gone, a ghost, disappearing into the building he had betrayed. The office fell silent again. Maria finally let herself breathe. David walked closer, his expression one of deep concern and something unspoken. Why didn't you tell me about the threats? He asked. Because I needed him to feel safe enough to reveal himself, she answered. Fear makes people careful. Comfort makes them honest. He nodded slowly. You shouldn't have to face danger alone. She looked up at him. And yet, you were here. Yes, he said quietly. Because I'm not letting you face anything alone ever again. The words hung between them. Heavy, honest, real. But even as the moment softened, a darker question now loomed over them both. Thomas had confessed, but he had also warned them that a rival company powerful enough to destroy Horizon Tech, ruthless enough to target a single woman. Now they stood at the edge of a different kind of danger, a public war, a silent burial. Justice or safety? David turned to the window, looking out over the city that depended on his silence. If we expose the truth, he said, we make powerful enemies. Maria stepped beside him. If we stay silent, they'll just keep hurting others. Their eyes met two people once broken by the world, now standing between it and the truth. Stay silent or expose everything to the world. The choice they made next would change not only their lives, but the future of an entire industry. They chose truth, not the safe kind, not the quiet kind that hides behind closed doors and legal agreements. They chose the kind that storms into the light and refuses to be ignored. Within 48 hours, the world knew Maria's name. News headlines blazed across every screen. Cleaning lady saves billion-dollar company. Insider sabotage exposed at Horizon Tech. The forgotten genius who fought back. Reporters camped outside the building. Analysts debated her story on live television. People who had never heard of Maria Santos spoke her name with respect, with admiration, with disbelief. And Thomas Reed? He was arrested 2 days later, trying to flee the country using a private charter. The evidence Maria gathered, the footage, the recordings, the digital trail, was undeniable. Under interrogation, he confessed everything. The rival company that had funded the sabotage crumbled within a week. Its executives brought in for questioning, its reputation erased. Horizon Tech didn't just survive, that IT became legendary. Investors returned in record numbers. Trust in the company skyrocketed. And at the center of every interview, every article, every speech was her. But Maria didn't want the spotlight. She had spent too many years being invisible to suddenly crave attention. Recognition was not what had brought her back to life. Purpose had point one late evening, long after the chaos settled and the world moved on to its next story. David asked her to meet him in the basement. The same cold server room, the same concrete walls, the same humming machines. She stepped inside quietly, memories washing over her like a tide. This was where she had fought in silence, where she had reclaimed herself, where everything had changed, but now the room was different. Warmer, new lights glowed along the ceiling. Workstations filled the space. Whiteboards covered the walls. covered in ideas, equations, dreams not yet written. And above the entrance, freshly installed in steel lettering, were the words. The Santos Innovation Center. Maria's breath caught in her throat. "This place," she whispered, turning slowly. "It's yours," David said, stepping forward. "A center for people like you. Forgotten, overlooked, brilliant. A place where no one is judged by their clothes or their past, only by the light of their mind." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "David," her voice shook. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." He walked closer, stopping just a few steps away. "You didn't just save my company," he said softly. "You saved the man I used to be from the man I was becoming." He exhaled, then slowly dropped to one knee. The room went silent, the servers humming like witnesses to the moment. "Maria Santos," he said, his voice raw and honest. "I'm not asking you to marry me because you saved Horizon Tech. I'm asking because you saved me. You reminded me what truth is, what courage is, what love could be." He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a simple ring. Elegant, unpretentious, real. "Will you marry me and build a life with me?" Not as a billionaire and a cleaner, but as two souls who found each other in the wreckage. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. And then Maria smiled, a smile born out of pain, but of hope. "Yes," she whispered, point one word, point one promise, point one new beginning. As he stood and held her, the servers behind them pulsed with green light. A quiet echo of the first miracle they had created together. Point two broken lives, point two forgotten hearts. Now bound by love, truth, and second chances. And somewhere in the silent walls of that underground room, the past finally let go, making space for a future they would build together. This story isn't about money. That IT isn't about technology. It's about seeing people who are invisible. It's about second chances. It's about choosing courage over fear. Somewhere right now, someone around you is being ignored, someone with the power to change your world forever. Maybe they're just waiting to be seen.